saved me. I'm not going to forget my wife. I'm happy to sometimes forget to introduce her, so he saved me there. But you are a very special group of people to me, and I really thank you, and I'm privileged and honored to be asked to talk to you. You're not going to have a Jerry Ford or a Kissinger speech. I'm just going to talk to you just as it was and tell you a few things about what I was doing until I happened to arrive over Hiroshima August the 5th, August the 6th of 1945. While you were at places, I'm sure you were not getting the morning newspaper, so you probably didn't know too much about what was going on. But much has been said about this atomic flight, both of them, especially the first one. But I think we all got to realize that we would never been able to fly up there just like a flight from New York City to California. It hadn't been for the people that took those islands back, and the other B-29 that bombed Japan so much that the fighter force was practically gone, to where we had no problem whatsoever. Those people deserve an awful lot, most of the credit. Our job was very easy. But I wanted to tell you a little about my early career, first part of my career in Europe. Then I'll get into the Manhattan Project. And after I get through, if there's any questions anybody would like to ask, I'll try to answer as best I can. But as Wayne said, I was born in Davie County, 11 children on a farm during the Depression. And I guess we had a little bit more to eat than you all did in the prison camp. So, most of you my age are close to it, so you know how hard it was during the Depression, especially 11 children on a farm. They're all living, all 11 children are living today, doing quite well. And my mother and father lived to be 89, so I think we had so far had a pretty full life. And I went to Leesville Creek College, I was Mount Elk for 2 years. Got my 2 years in, which was required to get the aviation cadet program. And I got in the airport, and when you were being captured, I was sending my clothes home from the cadets at Montgomery, Alabama. I was in the cadet program there, and went on to Albuquerque, graduated there in March of '42 as a bombardier. Immediately went to the B-17 group in Sarasota, Florida. Can anybody hear back there all right? How do you turn this thing up?
He just gets closer to it.
Just get close to it. How's that? I'm sorry. No, I went to Albuquerque and graduated there as a bombardier in March of '42. Went straight to Sarasota, joined the B-17 outfit. As I was walking down the street, I ran across this captain. Well, I was wandering around looking for my squadron, and it turned out to be Paul Tibbets, who was my squadron commander. And right today to this, we have been very close friends. We went to England, got there in June. They first sent us to Bangor, Maine, to go to England in May. After we'd made 3 flights together as a crew, we didn't even know each other's names, but we were trained. So the Midway battle started, so they sent us to California for the Midway battle. But thanks to the Navy, they set that thing straight before we could get over there. They sent us back to Bangor, and in June, last of June, we arrived in England. And we flew the first B-17 mission, daylight mission in France, on France, out of England, in August 16, '42. I flew about 8 missions there prior to, we picked us to take General Clark to Gibraltar, for to take him or trying to go across to deal with Darlan. We waited there for a week for him to come back. We went back to England, and he said, you won't be flying any more combat here. If you want to go to London for a week or somewhere, go ahead, but you'll be taking General Eisenhower to the same place you took me, which was Iraq. So I took him for his word, and I went to London. But the rest of the crew stayed there, and the co-pilot had got dysentery while we were in Gibraltar. He went to the hospital. About the 4th or 5th day I was in London having my time. I got a call about 10 o'clock, if you want to go with us, you better get home. So I caught the only train left back to Peterborough where we were stationed, and they had my stuff packed. I got on the B-17 with them, which sent us down to Hearn, which is South England, and fenced us in for 2 days, fed us in the Quonset hut. Couldn't even leave the Quonset hut. About 2 o'clock in the morning, we got a message, a sealed message, opened up and it says, proceed to your aircraft. Get to the aircraft and there's a bunch of people standing around with suitcases, trunks, and you open the order that says your body is being departed with. And it was General Eisenhower, he had 2 stars, and it was 2 colonels, which turned out to be Norstead and Vandenberg, and a colored cook. And the order said that you can only take 50 pounds. Each passenger can have 50 pounds, so they must have 400 or 500 each. So Paul turned to the general and said, General, you can only take 50 pounds. And he said, you heard what the colonel said, get 50 pounds ready in 10 minutes. So they just had to throw their stuff around and got what they could. And got aboard and started to get aboard. It was raining so hard you couldn't see. And Paul turned to the general and said, well, General, what do you think? He said, young man, you're running the show. Paul said, we go. And you couldn't even see your hand before you, but we took off and got into Gibraltar. The next morning, somebody else had brought General Clark in again. We left General Eisenhower in Iraq, and we picked up General Clark and took him on to Algiers for the invasion that morning. And we had an escort of 20 American fighters, British fighters, to escort us down, and we got about, I guess, 30 or 40 miles from Algiers. They told us they were running short of fuel. They'd have to leave us. So they went on in and landed, but they went in and landed, we could hear one group say, well, I verify 40 HE-111s over this area. And the other one said he verified 30 HE-111s in another area, headed for the docks. So we landed with the general. The Hurricane had already landed, and we're fueling up with 5-gallon gasoline cans, and we stood there and watched them. They took off in all directions. And they popped those Jerrys up right over us as they were going across there to the docks with the fleet. And they shot, I guess, must have been a half a dozen or more down while we were standing there watching. But we pulled off the runway, and these 2 armored cars drove up to get the general and his staff. And I noticed some puffs in the runway. Kind of a dud sound, and I didn't realize what it was, and all of a sudden this old Canadian general was saying, who was on the general staff, said, get organized, get organized. And by that time the co-pilot said, organized hell, I'm going, because we recognized there were bombs, delayed action bombs in the runway. So he left, and I was right behind him. But they got the general and his staff in his armored car and took off, and we stood there, stayed there for 2 weeks waiting for take he and Darline out in case they got in trouble, and 2 or 3 times they notified us that we would be leaving with them, but it settled down to where they went back, so we never did leave with them, but we finally went back to Oran to rest, and Darline was killed the night we left. And we went on there, went down to the desert, but it was raining so much we couldn't bomb fly out of there, so we went down to the desert, and I stayed there until, Paul and I did both until about December. And he went to up with General Doolittle, and the group commander we had got promoted, so I went up to the wing with him and broke up that crew. And Paul came home in the spring, but I stayed until April of 44. And I left in Italy. I flew 63 missions, and I flew my last 13 missions, special missions when I was asked for. And I was supposed to fly 15, or I told him I'd fly 15, but you weren't supposed to fly 50, but it also had been fly 15 more. But after 13, I failed to get home 3 times. So it looked like my time was kind of running out. So I fudged on them and didn't fly those last 2, and I came on home. I got home, I was supposed to report to Washington. And I went to see General Vandenberg, who was now a Major General, who was a colonel when he went with us to Africa. And he told me that you've been selected for a special project. I don't know what it is, but go on down to Miami Beach and rest, and we'll be in touch with you. And I said, what's down at Miami Beach? He said, oh, that's a place to go rest. So it turned out to be a bunch of nice hotels that they put you up in, and you didn't have, I had one appointment in a month, a dental appointment, and after that 4 weeks, I hadn't rested much. I was the worst shape it was when I got there. So I decided I better move on because I hadn't heard anything from General Vandenberg. So they sent me to Galveston, Texas, to a bombardier school to teach me how to bomb. So I got there, and most of the people, instructors, were people that had flown on my wing in England and Africa, and I was the only major bombardier in the Air Force. The staff thought I was there to get their job, so I wasn't very popular. So after a month there, I thought I better move on somewhere else. So they sent me to Ardmore, Oklahoma, a B-17 staging group that proved we're going back overseas. So I figured I'm going back overseas to B-17, which was fine with me. But after a month, nothing happened, and I'm getting ready to call General Vandenberg or write him to find out what was going on. But I decided maybe I'll get a shout. So the same day I was going to write him, I got a secret message from General Armstrong, who was raised here in Franklin, North Carolina, who was also a savage at 12 o'clock high, if you remember that movie. He was my first group commander, but anyway, excuse me. I called him, he said, keep your damn mouth shut and go on out the Wendover. So the same day I got a message from Wendover, a top secret message, that said of great urgency, transfer him to Wendover, Utah. So I'd gone in to see this group commander, a West Point colonel. I put my uniform on, my medals, and I went in and saluted him, and I thought I was very military. And he began to chew me out. A major come in and asked the colonel to call the general. So I stood there and listened to him chew me out for a while, and finally I said, well, Colonel, it doesn't say I can't call him myself. So I just turned around and walked out, didn't salute or anything, and called the Armstrong. That's when he told me to keep my mouth shut, just go on the window. So I got my B-4 bag, which is all I owned, and my car, and headed for Wendover. Drive out there, and I don't see a thing on the airport, or our base, but one old Lockheed Hudson, and an old cracked up P-47. And I could see the flag up on the hill, and I've been shafted again. And it was listed as a fighter base. I couldn't figure out why would they be sending me to a fighter base. So I finally found the headquarters where the flag was, and I walked in as a lieutenant and a secretary sitting there. That's all I could see anywhere. The streets were all empty. And I asked the lieutenant, I handed him my orders, and he said, you can't see anybody right now. He said, I don't know what's going on. He said, there's some people in there briefing the lieutenant colonel, and that's all I know. So about 10 minutes later, the door opened, and Paul stuck his head out and looked at me, what the hell are you doing here? And I said, what are you doing here? So it was General Marshall and Dr. Ramsey and 3 or 4 more people, Oppenheimer. They were all briefing Paul. So he came out, and I went in, and they told me very little. They just said that they were designing something that would destroy everything within 8 miles. And they would like for us to do it. So I went on out and talked to Paul, and we discussed it, and I said, a bunch of damn long hairs, they don't know what they're doing. I'd seen a lot of bombing, he had too, in Europe. They don't know what they're talking about, something destroyed, thing with 8 miles. So they told us we could get 2 crews anywhere in the world that were by name. All we had to do was just give the names to Washington, and they would get the people for us, for 2 crews. So we discussed it, and he said, I've got 3 pilots that have been flying with me at Eglin testing B-29s. He said, you get the navigator, another bombardier, 2 navigators, another bombardier, and we'll form the 2 crews. So I said, well, how about Dutch, who was the navigator we'd had in Europe? He said, you know where he is? I said, yeah. All right. So so I got him, and he said, yes, he'd like to go. And I'd known these two boys in Ardmore, one of them in Enola Gay, and I'd known the other one in Europe, the bombardier. So I asked them if they wanted to go, so I got them. So that's how we formed the first two crews that actually did the two drops. Now the 15 crews that came there from Grand Island, which you read about, or if you read the book or the movie, saw the movie, they were specially trained crews, this, that. Now that was just a crew, a squadron that took out a B-29 outfit in Grand Island, Nebraska. They were good crews, nothing wrong, but they were nothing special. They were just a squadron. They just took out a squadron getting ready to go overseas. And those 15 crews, now the Nagasaki crew was part of that squadron. Now the crew that I flew on was a crew in the squadron, but Lewis, our co-pilot, had that crew. Paul and I, or Van Kirk, never were part of a crew in that squadron. I was supposed to be I was the group bombardier, which normally helps train the other bombardiers. But my job was testing the different units that year to find out what would be the final thing as far as what we dropped. We had to develop different cases because we didn't know what the shape was going to be. And I flew with a crew out of Wright Field, a Major Shields. They had an old aircraft, B-29. They had to cut out half of the section between the two bomb bays because the first three units they sent me to drop were about 18 feet long. We call them the telephone poles. So at that time they thought the barrel of my bomb, or the tube they call it, was going to have to be that long to get the velocity to cause a chain reaction, compress the core enough to cause a chain reaction. I dropped one and it was a telephone. That's just the way it went down. So we had to give those up. And we finally kept refining, or they did, the mechanism to where they got it down to where actually it was only about 7 feet long, but then we could put it in one bomb bay. And the other bomb, as you know, was an implosive type, which was more round, a perfect sphere. So the case had to be like a pumpkin. We call it the pumpkin. But we had to drop many of those to come up with something that had ballistics that would come close enough to where we needed to be. And during all this, each unit would take probably, some of it would be 2-month units. We never called anything a bomb, it was always a unit. And when these things would be developed at Los Alamos, most of them were actually developed at Los Alamos, the inner working cases were made right there on the base. So they'd bring the units in at night, and we'd load the aircraft, and I would seal the bomb bay. The crew never saw what was the bomb bay. And then I would, thank you, I'd seal the bomb bay and give the pilot the weight for weight and balance purposes, but they would never see what was in the bomb bay. And the only 2 flights I remember that I flew actually one of the crews in that squadron. One was the Sweeney, who flew the pilot of the Nagasaki mission. And I think I remember I flew one mission, I think, or one flight, and dropped the unit with Lewis. All the other flights were with this special crew from Wright Field. And Paul and I never flew together on B-29 in the States. We never got in the B-29 together, we got to Guam, or the Tennesseans. But I flew with him, the C-54, all summer, traveling with him to different places. So, and we'd flown together in Europe, we didn't know what each other was doing. But I think it was next to the last unit that I had to drop for my bomb there. It would check the velocity of the tube to see where it was enough to cause chain reaction. And they'd taken the airplane back to Wright Field for a month, or a couple of weeks, and brought it back, and this major engineer came back with the aircraft and was with us as a passenger. And I always made at least 2 dry runs. We dropped it around 33,000 to make sure all the equipment on the ground was working and all my equipment was working. And then I'd make my drop. So I checked, made 2 runs, everything's fine. So I go cruising over the target, everything goes on when my tone goes off. Well, my tone went off, but no bomb left the aircraft. So I turned around to the pilot and I said, there's something wrong, it didn't go. So I said, just fly straight ahead. So I checked all my equipment to see if I'd done anything wrong. Every switch was in the right position. This major was standing back there. He really came up, stood over the pilot, said, you stoop, turn the damn switches on. So he put a switch in the aircraft, we didn't know about it. He flipped that switch, and my system was still energized. Boom, there goes the weapon. And we'd gone, I guess we were 12, 13 miles from where we should have dropped. But I yelled, it's in the air. And thank God they got the information they needed, because that would have delayed it 2 months. So it's been 2 more months, you people would, or at least that bomb would have got you out of there, because it would delay that weapon. At least, we decided at least it would have been a 2 month delay if they hadn't got that information to redo all this that they had to do.
That was the Nagasaki bomb.
No, that was the Hiroshima bomb. And we had an incident also with the Nagasaki bomb. They had made the shell for the bomb right there on the base. We had our own sheet metal shop for those. But later on, the ones they were made somewhere else, I don't know where. But we loaded it out of a pit, because so big it couldn't get the aircraft taxed over it. And we had to weld lugs on each end of it, because it was rounded on each end where the cable would slip off. And just use electric cable in the aircraft to hoist it in with. So it weighed around 10,000 pounds. So we hoisted it up, and Admiral Parsons and I were standing in the nose of the pit, in front of the pit. And we noticed the aircraft was kind of raising up every time it hit the hoist, hit the switch. So we stepped out of the pit. Just we stepped out of the pit, that rear cable broke, and that thing went like that. And that aircraft still had the guns on it, the turret. And it drove that front turret right out the nose of the aircraft. It just stood there and dangled like that. It also was one of the main fusing cycles. And it took us 2 days to figure out how to get that thing back. We finally kept lowering the front a little bit, got another hoist on the rear. We kept fooling about 2 days to get it back. If we'd lost that one, that'd been at least a month delay on that bomb. So there were problems that we had there that people never knew about. But we finally, this was all after the other aircraft had already gone overseas. They went over in May. The rest of the group went over in May. Paul and I stayed back. I had to tell these tests still to make, and he also had a lot of things he had to get settled before we went over there to stay. So on about, it was the 12th of July, they sent word for me to come immediately, that the last unit for my bomb was ready over there. They had to complete the laboratory there, they had assembled it there, and I had one more fusing test I had to make. So I was in Salt Lake City when the message came, and as I drove in the gate, they told me that I would support the headquarters immediately. So I go in and Paul showed me the message. And as I drove in, I noticed the officers club had burned down while I was gone. And the base commander's office right across from Paul's office. And Paul and I were discussing leaving. I said I had to leave that night. Seth Helson, the base commander, walked there and said, hell, he's not going anywhere till I find out who burned that club down. Said, he might have been in Salt Lake, I know he had something to do with it. But I left anyway with them the problem to solve the club. And I got over there 2 days later, and I immediately found out that there's a lot of undercover stuff going on. As you know, when something of importance is going to happen or people find out about it, petty jealousy creeps in. So what they had decided over there, the Navy and some of the Air Force, was that Paul was not qualified to do this because he had not flown with me in a B-29. And General May was all upset. And they'd even gone so far, the Navy had, and some of the civilian, or the scientists, to try to get me transferred into the Navy, and this Shield, the pilot I've been flying with, he had already agreed to transfer into the Navy. So I told him, I said, no way, nothing. I said, if Paul's not qualified, I'm not either. And I explained to him why it wasn't necessary that we had been flying the B-29 together. So I called him, I said, get over here because things are going to hell. Well, he came straight over, and he was supposed to see the Trinity drop, which I was going to too. It turned out neither one of us had to. But he came on over, and we went up and talked with General May. General May knew him quite well. So General May said, well, I'll send Blanchard down, who is his A1 or A3, and let him fly with you. Paul said, fine. So I had this one drop that I still had to make, so Colonel Blanchard came down, who later became a four-star general. But anyway, he came down and he got in with us, and he had never made a breakaway in B-29. Well, Paul made 2 breakaways with him, and he started screaming, I've had enough. You all right? I've had enough. So we settled that problem. And then the same week, or the next week, Paul and I went back up to Guam and sat down with General May and this same Colonel Blanchard and his which A3 and the 2 or 3 other guys. We sat down and selected the target, just what order we were going to take them in. And at first, I wanted Kyoto, so did General May, but Mr. Tenson rolled that one out for religious purposes mostly. So Hiroshima appeared to be the best one that would do the most good with what we wanted to get out of it. In other words, we could tell the maximum results and the minimum results better on that city than any of the other 5 that we had that had been saving for this purpose. So we selected Hiroshima as my target, mine, and then Nagasaki, Kokura as the next one. But it turned out they had to bomb Nagasaki instead of Kokura. But as far as mine went, there was no problem. We got it loaded in the evening. And natural at that time was a lot of press was beginning to show up. And you could hardly get to the aircraft to get in it to leave. But then they told everybody to go to the south side of the field. There's 4 runways, parallel runways. So they made everybody except the fire trucks go to the south of the last runway. And we were the only aircraft in that area plus the fire trucks. But there was no problem, 2 o'clock in the morning, and Paul wanted to hold on the runway because he wanted to get off the island in case something happened. So he and Lewis had a little problem on the runway. Lewis trying to lift it off, and Paul trying to hold it on. But we got off all right, and at first we were going to arm the thing on the ground. And Admiral Parsons, who was the best one I'd bumped into as far as fusing with it, the Army thing, so he said he thought he could arm it in the air. So that afternoon before we took off, he and Jepson, the lieutenant that helped him in the air also, worked out a procedure they could arm it in the air so that if we did crash, we wouldn't have a full order detonation. We'd get a detonation, but we would not get a full order nuclear detonation. So that's why we decided to do it in the air. And after we got to about 4,000 feet, we leveled out, and Parsons and Jepson went back to Bombay, and I just went back and sat there and observed them as they took all this front off, and they had to rearrange the cables from where they had them, where they were safe, to another position to where it was armed. So from that moment on, it was armed. And we got over about 60 miles from Japan, or from Hiroshima, and I could actually see the outline of the city. And Van Kirk, who was the best navigator, what I'm sure there was in the airport, so every flight I ever flew with him, he always had me lined up perfect. He rolled me out there. All I had to do was just sit there, wait till I get my crosshairs on the target. I picked out this bridge as my aiming point, and just sat there and let it ride. So very, very simple. And we had two other aircraft in the area. I think the photographic ship was 30 miles away, and I believe the blast gauge ship was around 9 miles. I'm not sure about that, but they were in the area anyway. And as my tone broke, the photographic ship was turned in our direction to get the photographs, and the blast gauge ship was supposed to drop the instruments, but the Japanese to this day still think the bomb was dropped from those parachutes. But I just talked to a crew from Tokyo just recently, and they still, that was one of the main questions, how many parachutes, how many bombs did you drop? Well, I think I got them to understand that the parachutes had blast gauges. They had nothing to do with the bomb itself. They weren't in the same airplane at all. But after I saw it was gone, I watched it as far as I could, but I want to make sure it wasn't tumbling. And Paul immediately started to turn. Well, that kind of racked me up. I wasn't prepared, never was for many G's. And I forgot to put on my glasses, and he was flying instruments, and he didn't put his on. So after we turned and rolled out, it went off, and fortunately we were going away from it. It blinded us just momentarily, but there was nothing permanent whatsoever. And as we rolled out, probably 2 minutes before we could actually look out broadside, where I could see it anyway, the tail gunner, the way, because they'd already seen it. But when I saw it, it was forming the mushroom, and it was spreading out over the city of all colors. I mean, there's no way in the world to explain it unless you see it. The different colors on the ground, it was just rumbling out. And on the stem, you can see buildings and everything going up the stem, where it was sucking the stuff up. And then immediately after that, the stem broke, and the top broke off. And then it continued, the top continued to form. And by that time, I'd gone back into the radio compartment to have a partner, but we had to prepare a message to the president where it was satisfactory, or where it was full order detonation or not. So the admiral and I sat there and looked at it and tried to decide, make sure that in our own mind it was a full order detonation, because the president was not going to announce it, what it was, unless it was. So somehow, the radio operator sent my message, very satisfactory, or satisfactory, or the admiral was satisfactory. We don't know which one it was, but it got confused, and tailed it up an hour in Guam, kind of figure which to see it, satisfactory or very satisfactory to the president. And to this day, I don't know which one they sent. But they said it did hold them up for an hour and sending the message. And you read the book or seen the movie, they talk about where we discussed what it was on the way up. Boy, I never heard one word, and never did, anything about an atomic bomb on the way up or on the way back. For the simple reason, why would we be telling people what an atomic bomb, which we weren't even supposed to announce, that unless it was a full order detonation, we wouldn't tell anybody. So I don't think there's any reason for it to discuss it on the crew. So it wasn't discussed on the crew. And the first time I heard it mentioned, called an atomic bomb, was when I got off the airplane back at Tennesseans. General Spots came up to Paul and pinned a DSC on him, and everybody, the wheels were around him, and finally the brigadier general came up to me and said, "Tom, can I talk to you?" I said, sure, it's fine with me. And he said, well, what did the first atomic bomb look like? That's the first time I ever heard that word. I've been in meetings with General not General Marshall, but General Rose, Dr. Oppenheimer, and a lot of the scientists, but never have I ever heard them mention atomic before that. They would talk in equations or formulas between them, but it might have been Greek. I didn't know what they talked about anyway, but there was no reading for them to tell me, but that's the way they talked to each other, was in formulas and equations. So that word was never used. Nor was the Air Force ever allowed to be associated with Los Alamos. If we went to Los Alamos, or any Air Force person went to Los Alamos, you had to put on other insignia. Because there's no way would Los Alamos be associated with the Air Force. And we want to go to Hanford or Oak Ridge, the same thing. But it wasn't as strict there on that as it was at Los Alamos. But it's definitely Los Alamos, no Air Force insignia ever. So after that, get the aircraft out, we landed. Back to the press everywhere. Nothing like it would be today if you blew a tire. There was a lot there that day anyway. And for about 3 days, we talked to quite a few people and were preparing for the third mission. Paul briefed Sweeney, I briefed Behan. Paul briefed Sweeney, you do not stay in any place more than 15 minutes, because he had to rendezvous with these aircraft like we did in Iwo Jima. But they were rendezvousing at a different point, not far from Iwo Jima. Well, one aircraft didn't show, so Sweeney waited an hour. In the meantime, the weather ship had called back that Kukura was open. But the 45 minutes that he stated he shouldn't have allowed the clouds to move in. And I'd brief in, you do not drop period unless you visually know 100% where you're dropping. But I said, nobody's going to take the blame but you. So he went across, and he was so cloudy he couldn't make sure it was Kukura. So they told me he wouldn't drop. So they decided to go across and come back on a reciprocal heading and try it. And as a Navy commander was in charge of that bomb, whether it's this admiral or the Navy captain, actually they made him admiral when it landed. But he was Navy captain. But anyway, he was in charge of mine, but his commander, so he and Sweeney decided to make this reciprocal heading. They're burning up fuel, 33,000, and it was clouding up more. But he said, I can't do it. So they got together and they're flying there. He thinks they got fuel trapped, he thinks. So they don't have enough fuel to get to Nagasaki. So finally decided to make a pass at Nagasaki if possible and go on into Okinawa. So to get to Nagasaki, it's closed up. But the radar operator lined Behan up long enough where he saw an opening. And I looked at it on radar and I looked at it visually since. And Nagasaki and the area he bombed looked exactly like the bend in the river and everything. So he let it go, and it hit about 4 miles up the river from the city of Nagasaki where it's supposed to. It hit an industrial area, and it killed quite a few people, did a lot of damage, and we could tell them we weren't bombing the city. And this old admiral up from Hawaii told me, and he said, well, Captain, he said, sometimes people have a sure horseshoe of it, and sometimes it don't. He said, this time I figure you had a horseshoe of it. So they, I say it hit an industrial area rather than the city. So we visited Nagasaki immediately the war was over, and the city itself wasn't hurt at all. In fact, we spent the night there, and you couldn't tell it ever happened.
That industrial area was
There was a torpedo plant that went up. It blew a hole out 200 or 300 feet deep, and you could put 2 or 3 baseball fields just in the torpedo place where we were. Well, we did immediately go up there. We were circling the place when they signed the treaty, and landed immediately and visited. We didn't land at Hiroshima because the city of the runway was closed, but we landed in Nagasaki. But the first thing they would ask us, did we know the people that did it? And they're walking around with one finger sticking up in one aircraft. But the first thing they wanted to know, did we know the people? But naturally we didn't. Because we were under different names. But we were free to go wherever we wanted to. We just didn't tell them who we were. But that was one question they always wanted to know. And we came back, and Paul and I came back to the States. The rest of the crew, Van Kirk came back with us. The rest of the crew stayed over there to bring the B-29 back. We came back in C-54. We came back in in September, and we were Paul and I were under a different name until November, when the crew came back from Tennesseans. The whole outfit came back in November. And Paul and I joined them in Raleigh, New Mexico, and they announced that we were back. We stayed there for about 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 weeks, and one morning base commander called me and said, say, Associated Press is asking me from New York if you've gone crazy. He said, they say you're in an institution upstate New York. And I said, well, do you think so? I'm not in New York anyway. And he said, well, I just told him I saw you at breakfast and all you had was a hangover. He said, I didn't think anything. But some minister, evidently the way they finally traced it back, had commented in a sermon I wondered how I felt. Well, before somebody got home, they had me in an institution. And the next morning, Walter Winchell had this column that I was in an institution upstate New York suffering from mental remorse. And different times since then, the press have tried to get Paul and me both in institutions. At least they claim we've been there. But most of it has come by Etherly, who actually did go off his rocker, who flew the weather ship for us ahead of us. And he robbed post offices, ran guns, but it was to get arrested. He wanted publicity. And he had a mental problem, and he was finally put in a mental institution. But he would write an article that he was the pilot, and then print it. So now the people say it was Paul. And he'd write, well, I dropped it. So they'd think, well, it was me. So they'd have me in it again. So that's how it's gone over the years. But it's amazing, especially last year, the people I've talked to in the press in different parts of the world that thought we were both crazy in that institution. But I assure you that neither one of us ever suffered any remorse and never will.